Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome. All right, you guys. Well, welcome back to another episode of our new series, Beyond the Workout. You guys, we are so excited. So as you guys know, we've been discussing in this new series a lot about what goes beyond just the physical workout itself, right? What goes on beyond squats and push-ups and all that good stuff that we know and love. But beyond the workout, the main idea that we've been talking about is around holistic fitness. So what is holistic fitness? Holistic fitness is the synergetic path to wellness that considers essentially equally the essential components that make a whole person. So that includes physically, emotional, psychological, and spiritual. So there's a lot of different components here that we're talking about. Today we are going to be focusing on the psychological. And we have a very special guest that we're so excited to introduce to you guys. Her name is Michaela. Now, brace yourselves because Michaela has such an impressive background and we are so excited to have her today to chat. So who is Michaela? Well, Michaela is a licensed psychologist and researcher. She currently works with active duty service members and has previously worked with children and adolescents and their families to address issues hindering academic and emotional functioning. So her areas of research include the impact of technology on decision making and the intersection of race and gender within schooling and employment. Michaela also explores the impact of racially discriminatory experiences on individuals within the workplace and institutions of higher learning. She works to interpret challenges that children of color face through a psychological lens and create avenues of communication between researchers, product developers, and educators. She also holds her BS in psychology from the University of Florida and a master's in education in mental health counseling and a PhD in counseling psychology from Fordham University Graduate School of Education. So holy guacamole, you guys.
Oh my gosh. Are you guys still with us?
Yeah. One, are you guys still with us? Two, are you guys excited? Because, oh my gosh, this is the opportunity of a lifetime to get to chat with her. So without further ado, please welcome Michaela. Michaela, go ahead. Feel free to take the floor and just give us a little background on yourself and where you're from, your background in psychology, and what you've been up to lately.
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is so exciting. This is so cute. So, I love this. So, yeah, I'm a psychologist. You kind of covered the general background, right? I went to school at Fordham University in New York City, and after finishing up there, I moved to D.C. for my internship in psychology, where I worked at Walter Reed for a year. And so I worked in all sorts of settings at Walter Reed: inpatient, outpatient treatment, health psych rotation, working with people who were actually ill on the unit, hospitalized, and were having psychological factors impacting their conditions or their engagement with the medical system. And now I'm in Mississippi, which is a huge change. And I'm working on a military base here, a Navy base. I've been here for the last 2 years almost. So I see the gamut. I work with a lot of trauma, but also a lot of people who are trying to kind of figure out how to get motivated, feeling, just generally when you're in a funk and you can't figure out how to get out of it. And really a lot of the work that I do ends up focusing on the holistic picture, right? What we're doing, not just how we're feeling, but what we're doing impacts how we're feeling, and vice versa. How our engagement in health and wellness can impact our emotional health. That comes up a lot with my clients. So I'm excited to talk about this.
That is a perfect segue to what we're discussing. And by the way, everybody in this room, if you guys have any questions for Michaela, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll help let you jump in. This is an open table discussion, so anybody and everybody is welcome to participate, okay? So that's so amazing. So can we just dive right in then into that holistic wellness and what it is that you tell your patients, like what kinds of things that come up, and then how essentially you say, okay, well, let's look at the bigger picture holistically, and what does that even look like? Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that's like a loaded question, but dive right in.
Well, a huge question, but well, when I sit down with somebody for the for the first time, and they're presenting their issue, whatever it is that's bringing them in, we do a full assessment, right? What's going on in pretty much every area of your life, including what's your medical history, what's your nutrition looking like, how often do you exercise, are you smoking, are you drinking, how much are you drinking, and how all of that is a part of the full picture. And that's a big discussion in our first appointment. So oftentimes I'll have people come in and they come in with the presenting thing, right? I'm getting really terrible sleep and I'm feeling awful, right? My mood is terrible. And then with further assessment, it turns out not only are they getting really terrible sleep and their mood is awful, they're also eating like crap. Things aren't going well in terms of how they're taking care of themselves from a full picture. And so there's a lot of education around how all of that impacts your emotional well-being, and obviously vice versa, right? If you don't feel good, you don't want to do things that help you to be healthier. But so trying to help people understand how all of that's interrelated is a big part of that initial assessment. The other thing is, the things that we eat, how often we're exercising. Sorry, my dog is whining.
Love it. Your dog is always welcome.
Yeah, always. So cute.
You guys should see her on Zoom right now. Her dog is like just walking across the screen, and you can see his little tail like back and forth. So cute.
Yeah, he's a hoot. But anyways, so yeah, it really helps to understand what is going on from a health perspective, because that has such a huge impact. A really good example is a while back, there was somebody who came in and they're like, I feel frenetic all the time. I feel frantic. My energy is super low. Well, it turns out they're not sleeping. They're barely eating. They haven't been exercising, not getting out to take walks, not being outside. And so a big part of our conversation was around, okay, we're not going to be able to address what's going on emotionally until we sort out like the fact that you're not sleeping. Like, we really need to get that together until we sort out the fact that you're extraordinarily, like, your vitamin levels are depleted, right? You probably need labs drawn to see what your hormonal levels are looking like. With chronic sleep deprivation, it's impossible to separate the mind and the body. It's really, if there's no distinction, it's one. So helping people to understand how all of that interacts and affects them as a whole is really important.
I love that you just said that the mind and body is one. Mm-hmm. There's no distinction between the two. That's really what we've been talking about this entire time, how everything is so interrelated. Now, you brought up in the beginning that you said that you talk about educating them. How often do you run into clients or patients who aren't educated about any of these things? Like, do you feel like is this the first time that they're hearing that being in nature is important, that sleeping is important, that taking your vitamins is important, that moving is important? Like, how often do you run into that? And a follow-up question to that is, like, have you seen a difference in a person, like getting to know them throughout the time that you're with them, whether their upbringing affects all of these different things and all of their healthy habits?
Well, so, it happens quite often. I think one of the challenges when you're not feeling well emotionally is it's really, you get kind of myopic. It's hard to see how all of these other factors might be influencing how you're feeling. And that there are a lot of reasons that happens, right? It's not because somebody is just like not smart, right? But the way that our brains function when we don't feel well, it makes it hard to think through, problem solve, and really see. We tend to miss the forest for the trees when we're in that state, to no fault of like any individual person, right? And it's actually the amount of times that I've sat with somebody and found, like, I have a really great example. A while back, somebody came in they were like, I've been feeling so anxious lately. I don't know what's going on. And as I was going through my list of questions for them, we got to, okay, how much caffeine are you using? And this person was having like 8 shots of espresso before noon, and then they were having Mountain Dews, and then they were having more caffeine. And I was like, well, that's a stimulant. Like, you are over caffeinating, and to the point where you potentially are having an overdose on caffeine, right? And this was somebody who was, they were probably in their 40s at this point. So, they've been around for a bit. And I was like, hey, let's try cutting back on the caffeine as a first step and see where you're at baseline. And they cut back on the caffeine, and they still had some anxiety, but it was markedly reduced just with making that one tweak to kind of their health behavior. And that wasn't anything that I did, any magic psychoanalysis that I did. It was kind of a basic, okay, this is something that's very much wrong with your habits, and that's having a huge impact on how you feel emotionally. And so when you think about like health related behavior, in psychology, we tend to focus on like the individual person and individual factors that influence why they make decisions that they make. But there's also the perspective that social settings, sociocultural aspects, have a huge impact on our health-related behaviors, right? So that's the context that we exist in, right? I can be somebody who's really motivated to exercise, to eat healthy, but I could live in a food desert and not have access to safe places to exercise outside. Or I could not have been taught about different health-related behaviors. That's a big challenge when there's not exposure. But also there are a lot of barriers for people in terms of making healthier decisions for themselves. It's a combination of the individual and the broader social setting.
You're here.
Sorry, I'm like trying to look afar, but I was trying to unmute myself. So I love that you brought that up too, because I can only imagine the number of factors that, whether it's cultural, right? Like different cultures have different eating habits, let's say, or different foods that are just ingrained in your culture that you grow up with, or whether it's societal, or whether it's socioeconomic, or whether it's just like in that home environment, how present maybe your parents are around when you're growing up, and the kind of things they teach you, and whether they were active and how that impacts your activity level. So kind of, I know there's a lot of different factors, but what would you say are some of like the biggest ones that stand out to you in any of those departments that kind of impact whether it's that activity level or just that overall like I guess mental well-being in one's upbringing, if that makes sense?
Ooh, that's a really good question. It's really hard to say if there's one particular thing or a couple particular things that make the biggest difference. On an individual level, when you think about what drives somebody to make a decision for their health, the general kind of theory around that is that it's a combination of like perceived risk, right? Understanding what it is that they are being faced with, right? What the decision is that they need to make. But then there's also, cost benefit, right? Is this going to be more inconvenient than it is of benefit to me? Do I see myself do I feel like I have efficacy in making this change, right? Do I think that if I make this change, it's actually going to be beneficial to me? And do I believe that I can actually do it? So those factors on an individual level have a huge impact on whether or not somebody is going to decide to, get up and start taking walks on a daily basis, or joining a fitness class, or whatever that might be, or, changing their diet to manage their diabetes, right? That has a big impact. And then on a social level, right, I mean, there are tons of things that influence, like, what the decisions we make on a daily basis. Like, peer pressure can be a big one, right? If you're spending a lot of time with other people and eating junk or doing things that are very sedentary, it tends to be the thing that you do together, and that's how you form bonds with the people around you. That makes it really hard to say, hey, no, I'm not going to do that. Hey, why don't we go for a jog? When everybody's like, no, go away. I don't want to do that. Right?
I'm dead.
So, yeah, I think it comes back down to that. Like, it's such a multi-dimensional issue. It's not just one thing or like one thing more than the other, but it really is like the whole picture.
Well, first of all, let's normalize going on jogs with your friends, because I think that's a great little bonding experience. I mean, hello. I'm like, I wish more of my friends would be down, you know. But that's so true, and I think it's something that even if you are in shape, or even if whatever it is, but like, yeah, the social aspect really does play a big part of it. It's crazy. So I guess with that said, for someone who maybe if you're working with a patient and you realize that these are the things that you think would help improve their mental well-being or their state or whatever it is, and they're having that trouble of like you said, like a lot of times it's whether they believe that they can make that change or not, it's how would you approach that in the sense of like building that confidence within them, or kind of shifting their perspective to start something new? Because I know that's the hardest part.
Exactly.
Well, that's an issue that comes up in like all the time, right? Motivation to change and how to actually take steps to doing that. And when I'm sitting with somebody, oftentimes, we come in, there's stages of change, right? We can be in a state of pre-contemplation where we're not even thinking about making the change. We can be in contemplation where we're saying, okay, maybe this is something I'm interested in doing. We can be in an action stage or preparation to make the change, then action, or we can be in maintenance. We've already done it. We're maintaining, we're keeping it going. But when somebody's in that kind of pre-contemplation or contemplation, there's a lot of ambivalence. And I think it helps to meet people where they're at and really talk about, okay, what are the things that are, you feel, getting in the way? What are the pros and cons of doing this? And really talking through with them, and seeing where they're at in that process. And sometimes people aren't ready to take steps towards change, and it's about just kind of meeting them where they're at, making sure that they know what their options are, and helping to move them along. There's a specific technique called motivational interviewing, which is all about kind of rolling with the resistance, right? Not trying to force somebody along, because at the end of the day, if somebody is going to make a decision for a change in their life, they have to be the one to make the decision for that to be maintained. You can't force them. I can't drag them kicking and screaming to, get out of bed and go spend time with a loved one, right? Even though I know that's likely to have an impact on how they feel, me forcing them to do it, the reaction is not going to be great. So it's a lot of meeting people where they're at. And also when it comes to starting, it's important not to start with something completely foreign. It helps to try to start with something that is somewhat familiar to the person, something that they've done before that actually feels doable, right? Where they can feel confident, like, okay, I've done that before, I can do it again, right? So if somebody is coming to me and they're saying, I really want to make these changes in my life, and I want to be able to, I want to be able to go for runs, I want to be more active. And at the point that they're coming to see me, like, the most they've done is like take a walk down the street with their dog. Okay, let's start there. Take a walk down the street with your dog and build from there. It's the concept that I use a lot is behavioral activation. So it's just the idea of getting folks started, right? I'm having trouble getting up and exercising. So you know what? I'm just gonna put my sneakers on, and that's all I need to do, right? And so it's kind of priming yourself, getting yourself long on the steps. I know I can put my sneakers on and I can make it that far, and that's great, right? Then maybe it's, okay, let me go ahead and stand outside, right? Okay, that's done. I did that. Okay, let me just focus on taking the first step, like down the street. Do I feel like running? Maybe it'll hit me after I walk a block. I'll start to want to jog. Maybe it won't, but going in with kind of okay, patience, compassion for yourself. We do much better when we're like being positively reinforced as opposed to shaming ourselves into things. So using those concepts of positive reinforcement, small steps that are familiar, that are achievable is really important, because you don't want to start off with a negative experience where you're feeling crappy about yourself.
Totally. I love that. I actually, I think that reminds me of a conversation we've had in the past about like those trigger, what was that? There's like a specific term for it. I forget what it's called, but it's like those things that trigger a different behavior, like putting your sneakers on, or, you know, like whatever it might be, like going in the kitchen, like putting the fruit in front of the syrup or something like that, so it's easier to grab, XYZ, you know, whatever it might be. So like those triggers, I really like that idea of it, because it really is like a simple way to just, even if it's just like setting a reminder on your phone, it's very similar to that. It's just like reminding you of the action that should be taken. That's at least a step in the right direction. Now, on the other side of things, let's say that there's somebody who's like very health conscious and really wants to work out and really wants to eat healthy. And I mean, well, eating healthy, I guess this doesn't really relate to that part, but is health conscious and wants to like get better and do better and be stronger. However, they have a long-term injury that is hindering them from this situation, and now that is causing them stress or depression, XY, whatever that might be. What are some coping mechanisms then that you would give them in that situation?
Oh my God, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's something that I do see, especially working with military, active duty. A lot of them do very physical jobs and wind up with chronic pain, and that changes what they can do. Changes how they exercise, how they spend their days, and that's a huge challenge for folks, because, you know, it's a life changer, right? You know, you've relied on running for your kind of maintenance of your mental health. It's your stress relief, and all of a sudden you have a knee injury and you can't do that. So one, you know, I think it helps to take a look at, okay, what's going on in terms of their like emotional reaction to what's happening to them, what thoughts are kind of predominant. I tend to use a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy strategies with folks. So taking like, what's going on internally, like how are you processing this injury and what this means for you? What are the things that you feel as though you're losing because of this injury? And are all of those things wholly realistic? At the end of the day, I think everything goes back to being able to have balance and flexibility, right? When we're too rigid in any one direction, that's when we see dysfunction. So working on kind of flexibility in how we're approaching our lives in general can really help, and that includes when we can't do things that we used to do, right? I think the past year with COVID has been a huge exercise in flexibility for everybody, right? There's a lot that it feels that has been restricted, but there's so many things that we have the option to engage in a different way. So that's something that I talk about with people. Okay, so you have this injury. Does this mean that your life has to stop? Are there ways that you can engage in taking care of yourself and viewing your continued fitness as a way to care for your body, as opposed to like pushing yourself to the limit or feeling like, oh, because I can't do everything that I used to do, now I'm useless, right? I'm not worth anything, and now everybody thinks I'm lazy. That's not so helpful. And so working with them in terms of, okay, say you have an injury that is limiting what you used to do. What are options for you now? Are there ways that you can engage in fitness that can work with your injury, things that might help you to build strength, build flexibility, so that your injury becomes less painful on a day-to-day. One of the theories around like injury and chronic pain is that over time it becomes one, it affects how you engage in your day-to-day life, and stress and anxiety can exacerbate chronic pain. So finding ways to manage stress, manage that anxiety, engage in your life, even outside of just fitness-related activities, but also just things that contribute to your overall well-being can actually help with your experience of chronic pain. There's a difference, though, between like chronic pain and an acute injury that indicates like there's something that needs to be addressed in the immediate. But in terms of that like more chronic nature of pain, there's a lot of therapeutic techniques that we can use to help people manage chronic pain.
What happens if that person, you know, like you're giving them like these options and whatnot, but then it's like, and sorry to ask this, but also like I'm very curious to know, like, what happens if like they're still like, it's in a way like they're fighting it, you know, they're fighting it and they're like, no, like this isn't good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm gonna always be this way, and then all of a sudden it really takes a toll on their confidence, on their way of being day to day, on like to the point of like really just being unhappy. Like how can we, I don't know, fix, I don't know if that there's a way to fix that, but I guess I'll let you take it from there because I don't really know.
Well, I think when you experience an injury that has such a huge impact, it's a loss, right? And so like any other loss, there's not a quick fix to like grieving that. It's a mourning process, right? Things have changed, and that is reality. And so sitting with somebody in that sadness, that frustration, kind of allowing them to process those emotions, which I think are natural when you experience a loss. You know, stages of grief, right? It can apply to many different kinds of loss. So it's not a matter of like convincing them out of feeling sad about it. It's, yeah, this really sucks for you, right? Jumping to a silver lining isn't going to help, right? Oh yeah, no, you can't do that. But what about this, right? That's annoying.
Right.
It's really irritating when somebody does that. So allowing them the space to kind of talk through that. And then once somebody's ready, right, and we tend towards, okay, people tend to be pretty solution focused, right? At some point, we can sit for so long in like those emotions and work through them, and then we tend to want to say, okay, now what's going to come next? And that's the point where we can start to make some changes. But I think it's about not rushing to fix, and feeling like, okay, I have to come in and like make this all better for them, as opposed to, okay, let's talk about what's going on and how this has impacted you.
I think that's a really good point, because I think a lot of us, as we want to help, right? Mm-hmm. So then we're constantly like, here's the solution. But sometimes just like in any given situation, sometimes you just need a vent. Sometimes you just need to let it out. Sometimes you just need to feel the way you feel, sit with that, and then let it move through naturally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what I mean? So I love that you said that, and that's so great to hear. You know, it's a great reminder.
Great perspective.
Yeah, exactly. As being on the other end, right? So I guess like there's, you know, again, one of the biggest things that we've been talking about, I know we kind of have been talking a lot about the physical side of things, but a lot of it is around that holistic view and holistic fitness. So as far as like maybe like, you know, we've talked about meditation. We've talked about different mindful practices that you can do to also help in any of these situations, whether you're stressed, anxious, whatever it is. But I guess, what are your thoughts on those kind of like mindful practices? Are there some that you like, not to say, but recommend, or, you know, like a lot, or any kind of situation in your experience that you kind of want to talk on?
Oh my God, mindfulness, meditation, grounding exercises, relaxation exercises are a huge part of my practice. Helping people to become more aware of their present moment, and become more aware of their experience, what's going on in their bodies, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're seeing, what they're touching, all of all of your senses is humongous, right? Because if we're not noticing how we're feeling, we're not paying any attention, we can't address it, we can't process our feelings, we can't notice that we have an injury, whether it's emotional or physical, if we're ignoring our sensations, right? So I use a lot of breathing exercises with my patients, like a lot. A lot of breathing exercises, using a really simple one that I like use as kind of the baseline for everything. It's just a very basic slow breathing exercise. It's 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out, diaphragmatic breathing. So simple, but it has a huge impact, right? So when you think about when you're feeling like hyper aroused, right? You're overstimulated, you're anxious, you're angry, whatever it is, it's a physiological experience. Your body is having a reaction. And so being able to use your breathing to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of your nervous system that slows everything down. It brings your digestion back online. It slows your heart rate down, slows perspiration, allows you to calm yourself. It takes you out of that like anxiety state, that fight or flight or freeze mode that you might be in. Slow breathing actually has that impact on your body. So I use that with a lot of people. Just, okay, let's slow things down, right? Because when you're not in that state, when you're like really, really anxious, you're really hyper aroused, the part of your brain that controls like your decision making, your emotional regulation, your ability to process what's going on is offline. You are in like reaction mode. So I use breathing all the time. I also, really pitch, even with like my like kind of like older, like very rough and tumble, like very masculine guys, like, have you considered yoga? And it's actually all of these techniques, mindfulness techniques, are used with really high-performing people, high-performing athletes. It's used in special operations training. They use it to help people like figure out how to operate under high-stress situations without going into a complete freak out, right? Without melting down, without losing all of their faculties, being able to center themselves, ground themselves, and stay present in the moment as opposed to dissociating. So I use it a ton, especially when it comes to people who are dealing with chronic injuries and chronic pain who are coming in to address, the mental and emotional side of that. We talk a lot about incorporating mindfulness, grounding, relaxation exercises, stretching, things that can help them, be in their bodies and also experience their bodies in like a positive light as opposed to just in the context of this injury or this pain. So huge. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, stress is obviously one of the biggest reasons why people come to a psychologist in the first place. And I feel like that's very clearly the big elephant in the room, like external stress specifically. And it does, like, you're right, it comes in so many different forms, whether it is chronic pain, whether it is like injury or trauma, different experiences in life, being your relationships, work, anything and everything causes stress. So with that said, what are some like behavior change strategies that one can do to cope with external stresses?
Great question. Well, so there's so many things that one can do to cope with external stress. Usually it starts with, okay, how do you kind of prioritize, right? Like, how do we take a step back and figure out, when it comes to the stressors themselves, are there things that we can address, right? And if there are things that are just going to be there that we can't address, how do we learn to exist with them, with those stressors? Stress is natural, right? Anxiety is natural. They're all emotions and experiences that we can't get rid of completely. They serve a function. If we didn't experience any anxiety, we would just wander out into the middle of the street and get hit by a car, right? It keeps us safe in some ways. But the thing we want to work on is when it's unnecessary anxiety, when it's not serving us in any way, it's not like helping us to function at all, and in fact it's hindering our functioning. So when it comes to coping with external stressors, I think noticing for you, like, what are the signs that things are becoming overwhelming? And I like to think about those emotions as information and kind of cues for us to do something, or either do something for ourselves. It might not be that we're actually going to like go out and do something. It might be, okay, maybe I just need to like have a seat for a little bit, right? Or it can be, oh, this situation that I'm in right now is too much for me, and I need to like take a step back from it. Or it can be, I need to make a change in my life. It can be more active. But using your emotions as signals for yourself. That's how I like to think about it. And I think that's, rather than, okay, how do I get rid of this? Okay, what does this mean about what's going on, right? Am I feeling anxious because I have been running around nonstop today and I haven't taken a chance to like sit down, have a glass of water, eat something, and I need to like give my body some nourishment? Am I feeling this way because I've just been, I haven't been getting to sleep on time. I've been doing things that like make my body feel funny, right? And so checking in with ourselves on a regular basis and noticing how we're feeling. And then also, at times when like we're experiencing stress and things are really, really tough, like having some patience with ourselves, not beating ourselves up for feeling overwhelmed because that now you're having like a meta feeling. You feel bad because you feel bad, and now you're mad at yourself for feeling bad, right? And so just noticing how you're feeling, right? Emotions, they come and go, big mindfulness concepts, right? And so we can notice that, we can be aware of it, we can use our emotions as a way to tell us, okay, is there something I need to do? But we can also remove some of the judgment from ourselves for like being human and we're getting stressed.
Okay, what about fear? What about like what about the fear of making change? Making a change. Go ahead if you need to go do something for a sec. I'm
gonna let the dog out, but I'm still listening.
Okay. Like what about like the fear of making a change, that kind of feeling of like being paralyzed or not sure where to go or what to do, or being afraid of being a beginner again, or how do we cope with that when it's like, yes, like I've analyzed it and I've realized it, I know I have to make a change, I know that like something's not working, and I know that one thing is causing me this stress, but how can I like but I literally like don't feel empowered to do it, or I don't even know where to start, and I'm just afraid shitless. So like how, like if someone comes to you with that, like how would you kind of approach that?
Ooh. Well, it would really depend on the person, right? There are all sorts of things that drive our personal fears. Like what's underlying that fear? Is it a fear of failure? Is it a fear of rejection? Is it like perfectionism, where you feel like if I can't do it perfectly, I can't even get started? What's actually going on underneath that, and talking about that, figuring out what that is, and then spending time talking about, okay, so, what might it look like if you went ahead and did it? Helping people to kind of imagine, okay, what would the steps be? That can help to make it feel a little bit more doable and a little bit more within reach. But also addressing that underlying cause of the fear and really talking through, okay, what's going on internally that you're kind of convincing yourself out of doing this thing that you're wanting to do, and what are the pros and cons of you doing it? What do you fear is going to happen if you do it versus if you don't do it? And really spending time like just in that space talking through it. Fear is natural with any change as well. Anytime you're approaching the unknown, it's really natural to feel scared because that's that's like human nature, right? We want to know what to expect. We want to feel like we have predictability. So when we're entering into any new thing, there's always nervousness. And so something that I also talk about is the distinction between your emotions and kind of reality, right? You can feel one way, but that doesn't mean that this is actually going to be like a life-threatening situation. But also noticing your emotions, but you can choose actions based on like what you value and what it is that you want to do, as opposed to being driven by the emotions, right? There's a metaphor that I use with a lot of folks where imagine you've got this paper in front of your face and you're driving down the street, right? And you can't see around it. Would you want to drive that way? Okay. Now you move it out a little bit further, you get a little bit more distance from it. Now you have a little bit more peripheral vision. You can see a little bit more. Still not ideal to drive. You can put it in your lap though, and it can still be there. You can feel that emotion, but you can still drive, right? It doesn't have to stop you from moving forward. So sometimes it's not about like, okay, waiting until all of the nervousness is gone before you take the step, but knowing, okay, I can feel nervous but still do it, right? Mm-hmm. We do things that we feel nervous about all the time. We speak in front of people even though we have like a little tinge of nervousness before we do it, because we value being able to like share that information and being able to talk with people that we care about, right? So those different aspects are things that I tend to lean towards.
Yeah, and also, I mean, in the sense of, when you say fear, there's a fear of the unknown, there's a fear of failure. I think also, like, a big part of it is, like, the fear of being alone, right? Like, when you make these big changes, sometimes, let's say you're moving to a big city or a new city or something like that, sometimes it's like, will I find my people? Will I have that support? Or sometimes going into a new workout class is nerve-wracking, but if you have a friend to go with you, sometimes it's a little better. I mean, everyone's different, right? But in that sense, like, in that sense of being alone or, maybe having that community or feeling like you are a part of something, or, what kind of role does community or does that, like, belonging play in someone's overall, process and change or mental health, all that kind of stuff?
Well, we're definitely social creatures. We're social beings, and community is huge, right? Like, there's a reason throughout like human existence. One of the biggest punishments you could be subjected to is being kicked out of the village. Being cast out on your own is a really scary experience. Back in 400 AD, it would mean like you would starve, right? Literally, you would starve. But now you still have that same experience of like deep dread about being kind of cast out on your own, isolated, feeling like you don't have a connection with other people. It's really, really scary, understandably. But I think that's also part of why so much of what we do around like taking care of ourselves involves other people, right? We celebrate our birthdays with people around. We go to group fitness classes. We text a friend like, hey, do you want to come with me to this class? Because it helps to have like a familiarity, a buddy there with you. So having somebody who can support you on your journey certainly doesn't hurt, right? Having a friend who you can talk to, who you feel like you can bounce ideas off of, who is supportive of you and is encouraging you along the way, is ideal, right? But there is the reality that sometimes you are like branching out on your own into a completely foreign territory, and there's a lot of like, it's like, what's in the dark closet, like the boogeyman, right? I don't know what's going to happen when I step into this space. So when it comes to like addressing that fear in particular, talking about, okay, what are the like feared potential outcomes, right? We tend to lean towards like the most catastrophic, right? Everything's going to fall apart. There's no way I'm going to like be able to do this. Oh my God, right? So that's possible, right? But also, can we acknowledge the other possibilities, right? That things could go okay, things could go really well, right? What are the chances that even if things don't go as you wanted them to, does that mean that like the world ends, right? So kind of sorting through, okay, what's the fear? What are these feared outcomes? And like, how do I take a step back and gain perspective? And also kind of, what do you have control over in these situations, and kind of leaning on some of that. Okay, yeah, I may not know exactly what's going to happen when I go into this new thing, but I have had this experience before, right? Calling back to times when you've had a similar experience. And this is what I did to kind of get through it. And this is something that I know I can kind of do again to support myself as I venture into this new territory, right? So planning for things that can help you to feel a little bit more safe, whether it be like, okay, I know if I am freaking out, like this is who I can call and talk to, can be enough, right? So I think that can be really helpful.
That's so true. I was actually talking to Kim earlier today. Kim's on here right now. Hey, Kim. And we were actually talking specifically about that, how I love that you said, like, if you've done something before, then you can, and you've accomplished it before, then you can kind of like look back and be like, oh, I've done this before, so I can take those skills that I learned or that I've already done before, and I can apply them in this new situation. And then on the other side of the coin is kind of like, you know, we tend to stress out and we tend to fear all these things because of all of the experiences that we have already experienced. And so it's like, it's almost like the more knowledge you gain or the more experiences you gain, the more the deeper you can get into this dark hole of what ifs because of all the things that you've experienced already and seen already. And so then there's the positive side of like, yes, I can figure this out. And then there's this negative side that we, like you said, as humans tend to go to of like, but all these other things could happen because we've like seen and heard and learned about all these other things that have happened and whatnot. And so it's like, we get into this crazy like tunnel where it's like, we just need to, I think at the end of the day, I think like the lesson we can take from this is like being more mindful, being with ourselves, being with our bodies, giving ourselves the proper nutrients so that we can be in this like, so we can turn those like the rest and digest back on, turn the fight or flight off, and like be more in control of our mental health is going to allow us to navigate the waters of the unknown and of these challenges that we are going to encounter in our lives that are inevitable just a lot more smoothly, if that's like, I can't speak English properly, but yeah, that. Anyway, oh my goodness, this was absolutely incredible. We are like wrapping up on time, guys, but if anybody in here has any questions, now is your chance. We got like 3 minutes. Please raise your hand. Now is the time. If you guys have any questions that you're dying to get out, raise those hands. And also, speaking of community, this is some of the people in our incredible community that have been here. Some of them are Fuego Fitness people. Some of them are lifelong friends. Some of them are just, we've all created this incredible community together of people. And I can easily say that having a support system like them and having a community like them and, just being able to be together, sweat together, hang out together, all that stuff has just like, it goes without saying. Yeah. It's just one of those, it's just beyond special. And obviously Michaela is one of my bestest friends in the whole wide world. And we've known each other since high school. And I always tell everyone she's my smartest and most beautiful friend. I am so happy that we got to share her with you all today, because I think one of my favorite things to do too, and this is really great for my mental health personally, is bringing all the people that I love together in one space and giving everybody just a little taste of like that love and just goodness that everybody here has. So, all right. Well, if nobody has any questions, I guess we will wrap everything up. Michaela, I mean,
Oh my goodness.
Jesus, it literally goes without
I
saying.
feel like I could talk to you for hours.
I
I
know.
want this to continue on forever.
I can't
so.
believe like the hour just
I
like
know.
flew by.
I was like,
Thank you so much for being so special and giving us so much knowledge and just all of this. This has just been so educational. We love you.
Aw. I love you. This is awesome. Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much for your time, Michaela. We seriously appreciate it. And I hope you guys got a lot out of this. I know for a fact sometimes hearing all of this is just even a personal great reminder of all the things that we're capable of and all the ways that we can overcome our own doubts and fears and that conscious, that voice in our heads that sometimes doesn't always believe in ourselves as much. So thank you for that.
If anybody wanted to connect with you, how could we find you?
Probably email. I do have Instagram, LinkedIn. I have a Twitter. I don't really tweet often, but all of those things. I can send my ats. I don't know if there's a chat function on here.
There isn't, but if you guys maybe
Are you on mute?
Can you? Oh, am I on mute? So if you want, actually, everyone here, if you go and follow Michaela right now, go to her profile, follow her, and then Michaela, maybe you can add in your email in your bio or something like that. That way, people can get it that way, or Instagram or whatever you want.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
Beautiful. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being great listeners. Michaela, we love you so much. Thank you a million times over. And we will talk to you guys all very soon. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Bye, guys.
Bye.